In 1964, a shepherd boy stumbled across something in the hills outside Mosul that archaeologists were never supposed to find: a clay tablet, buried 3 feet underground, covered in cuneiform script that scholars still refuse to fully translate. The tablet described in explicit detail the genetic engineering process used to create Homo sapiens, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but technically, surgically, scientifically, and according to the handful of linguists who claimed to read the complete text. It matched our modern understanding of DNA manipulation with terrifying accuracy. Sumerian civilization appeared almost overnight around 5,000 years ago. With no clear evolutionary predecessor, they possess advanced mathematics, astronomical charts accurate to the minute, and a legal system more sophisticated than anything Europe would see for another 4,000 years. But what makes archaeologists uncomfortable is that the Sumerians themselves insisted they did not invent any of it. They said the Anunnaki gave them everything: gods who came from the sky, gods who needed workers for the gold mines, gods who decided to create a primitive labor force by mixing their own essence with the beasts already living on Earth. For decades, scholars dismissed these stories as mythology, primitive attempts to explain the unknown. But then linguist Zecharia Sitchin spent 30 years translating thousands of tablets that mainstream academia ignored, and according to his interpretations, what emerged was not mythology at all, but something closer to a laboratory manual, the so-called Tablet of Enki, allegedly discovered in 1964 and later said to have vanished during the chaos surrounding the Iraq Museum in 2003. Supposedly contain a step-by-step account of genetic modification written thousands of years before the discovery of DNA key. The Sumerian god of wisdom and creation described the process with the precision of a scientist documenting an experiment. The text began with a crisis. The Anunnaki had supposedly traveled to Earth around 450,000 years ago to mine gold, not for wealth, but to repair the atmosphere of their home planet Nippur by dispersing gold particles into the sky to reflect heat away from the planet. The mining operations in southern Africa were brutal. According to the story, workers rebelled and many died. Enlil, the commander, wanted to abandon the mission entirely, but Enki proposed another solution: create a worker species intelligent enough to perform labor, but obedient enough never to resist. The tablet claimed Enki and the chief medical officer, Ninti, took the blood of a young Anunnaki male and extracted what translators describe as the essence of life. Modern interpreters compare this description to DNA because the text referred to a twisted ladder structure. 2 intertwined serpents contain the instructions for creating life. Supporters of the theory point to the ancient caduceus symbol, 2 serpents wrapped around a staff, which later became associated with medicine, as evidence that ancient cultures somehow understood biological principles long before modern science. The story continues by describing how Enki and Ninti mix the essence of the Anunnaki with that of an ape native to Africa. The text supposedly described repeated failed experiments, beings unable to survive, reproduce, or speak, until finally they succeeded in creating what they called the Adamu, the first engineer human. According to the narrative, the hybrid embryo could not survive inside a primitive Earth female and therefore had to be implanted into the womb of an Anunnaki female because of the required body temperature and hormonal environment. The gestation period was said to last 10 months longer than apes, but shorter than the Anunnaki 13-month cycle. First 7 attempts allegedly failed. The 8 survived, but could not reproduce. The 9th produced sterile offspring, and only after 14 attempts did they create a breeding pair capable of producing fertile children. The text described the first successful Adamu as walking upright like an Anunnaki, but still covered in hair, with a heavy jaw and protruding brow. Strong enough for mining work, but primitive enough to remain controllable. The tablets then describe the creation of the Bit Shimti, the house where the breath of life is given, a facility supposedly located in the Abzu region, identified by some theorists as southeastern Africa, where mass production of workers began. 14 birth goddesses carried hybrid embryos at the same time, producing 7 males and 7 females in each cycle until thousands of workers existed. According to the Story Enki secretly altered the genetic code of two humans, granting them the ability to reproduce naturally, something the other. Anunnaki did not want because a self-reproducing workforce would become uncontrollable. The tablets described this moment as the fall, not a spiritual fall, but a loss of genetic control. Humans spread across the planet, developed language, culture, and independent thought, and Enlil demanded their destruction, but Enki refused. This is where the flood story entered the narrative. The Anunnaki supposedly predicted a catastrophic flood caused by celestial events and decided to allow humanity to perish. Enki secretly warned a man named Ziusudra, instructing him to build a massive vessel not merely to save animals, but to preserve the genetic essence of Earth's biodiversity, sealed inside special containers. After the flood, the surviving humans remain, but the tablets claim the Anunnaki shortened human lifespan by activating what interpreters call a death gene, reducing human longevity from centuries to less than 100 years. Narrative went even further, claiming that the Anunnaki later bred with humans to create a ruling class of hybrid beings known as the Nephilim, powerful rulers with extended lifespans and advanced knowledge who govern humanity on behalf of their Anunnaki ancestors. The text described different Anunnaki bloodlines producing different traits: intelligence, leadership, healing abilities, and spiritual sensitivity, and it referred to special substances called the food of life and water of life, which modern theorists compared to advanced anti-aging treatments or DNA repair technology. Supporters of these theories often point to ancient ruins in southern Africa, thousands of stone circles spread across vast distances, as possible evidence of prehistoric mining operations. Though mainstream archaeology does not interpret them this way, the story also connects itself to modern genetics, citing discoveries like the HAR1 gene and the FOXP2 language gene, both involved in brain development and speech. Some theorists claim these genes appeared too suddenly in human evolution to be explained conventionally, though evolutionary biologists strongly disagree and argue that these developments fit within known evolutionary mechanisms. Narrative claims the timeline matches human genetic bottlenecks identified by scientists, including the concept of mitochondrial Eve, the common maternal ancestor of all living humans who lived in Africa around 200,000 years ago. Supporters argue that this matches the Sumerian story of the first successful Adamic female, while critics point out that mitochondrial Eve is a scientific term describing ancestry patterns, not a literal first woman created in a laboratory. The theory also references endogenous retroviruses, fragments of ancient viral DNA embedded in the human genome, which some fringe researchers describe as intentional markers left behind by alien creators. However, mainstream genetics explains these sequences through millions of years of viral interactions and natural evolution. What makes the Enki narrative so compelling to many people is the apparent technical language describing extraction, modification, implantation, and hybridization, concepts that sound strangely similar to modern genetic engineering. Yet, historians, archaeologists, and linguists overwhelmingly reject these interpretations. They argue that many of the translations promoted by Sitchin are inaccurate and that no verified Sumerian tablet explicitly describes DNA genetic engineering or alien experimentation in the scientific sense. Mainstream scholars also note that there is no verified artifact known as the Tablet of Enki matching the extraordinary claims made in these stories, and no evidence that a suppressed translation confirming alien genetic engineering was ever hidden by academic institutions. Still, the fascination continues because the story taps into one of humanity's oldest questions. Where did we come from? And are the ancient myths of gods creating humanity based on symbolic memory, misunderstood history, or pure imagination? Ancient cultures across the world told stories about beings descending from the heavens, shaping humanity from existing material and attempting creation multiple times before succeeding, from the Egyptian myths of Khnum, molding humans from clay, to the Hindu Vedas, describing divine essence mixed with earthly matter, to the Mayan Popol Vuh, recounting repeated failed human creations. These similarities continue to fuel speculation that ancient myths may preserve fragments of forgotten ideas or shared symbolic themes about human origins. Whether the Anunnaki were real extraterrestrial beings or simply mythological figures remains entirely unproven, but the mystery surrounding ancient civilizations, lost knowledge, and the origins of humanity continues to fascinate millions around the world. And perhaps that is why stories like the Enki tablet refuse to disappear, because somewhere between mythology, archaeology, and genetics lies a question humanity still cannot stop asking. What if the story of human origins is far more complicated than we ever imagined?